Catharsis 2066 by David McGoings. Chapter 1. High Hopes. Dr. Liam Burke, age 54, born 2011, occupation, astronomer engineer, professor at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, location, Alaska, USA, date, October 2065. A cold chill glides over his body in a slow wave. His hands tremble as beads of sweat roll down his face and onto the desk in front of him. A short blip pings a notification in the upper right-hand corner of his computer screen. The notification pulsed and read, "One new message, data block attachment." He quickly brought his attention to a screen to his left and opened a window where he entered 2 lines of code. A prompt appeared, and he typed in a 17-digit password, followed by a 4-digit alternating code sent to his cell. The window loaded, and a map of the Milky Way galaxy appeared. The map was focused on Earth's solar system. Burke clicked an icon that opened a list of names. It was made up of different frequency buoys, or relay buoys, that were deployed in different regions of the Milky Way. Each of the names was followed by a 3-digit tag representing the more or less pinpoint location within the galaxy's spiral arms. Dr. Burke's eyes scanned the list. His face looked as though he was seeking some type of reassurance, or at least something to calm his nerves. As he scrolled to the bottom of the list, there it was. T2 012036 S CSEC 906, flashing red. He clicked the icon on the list and the map of the galaxy zoomed out and then back in on the selected beacon. It was in section 906, the edge of the Sanctum Crux arm of the spiral. Earth lay in Orion, 1 band closer was Sagittarius, then Sanctum Crux. The Trident rockets were launched in the year 2036 as part of a hypothetical deep space signal relay network. Dr. Burke designed the relay buoys himself as part of his final engineering proposal while attending MIT. His research turned heads and became the first globally funded NASA program that was focused on establishing first contact with another civilization. Utilizing solar propulsion, the buoys were deployed like breadcrumbs in a 360-degree ring around Earth. Each rocket, or Trident, had 3 relay buoys attached to it. The first was released at around 4.5 billion miles, about the distance of Pluto from the Earth. The Trident then continues on for another 9 trillion miles, where it deploys a second relay buoy. Then a third is launched at about 11 trillion miles after that. Solar propulsion was the engineering marvel of space technology to date. It allowed for unmanned craft to reach incredible speeds using the sun's energy and light particles as a means of propulsion in combination with microwave engine technology. It took nearly 30 years, reaching a maximum recorded speed of 13.5% of the speed of light, for these beacons to get to their destinations. The beacons were simple in design, but their ability to receive and send transmissions from great distances is what made them so impressive. As a first test, Dr. Burke and his team had sent a video in 4K resolution to the furthest buoy and back to Earth again in 6 hours and 21 minutes, with less than 2% degradation in original signal quality. This was Burke's prize project, his breakthrough science that left his former classmates in the ranks below him. Or so he thought. But it had been nearly 3 decades since his last breakthrough, his last published paper. He had authored a few different books in that time, one a sci-fi novel about time travelers that get caught in a loop, the other an autobiography, and the third was more of a rant than an actual book. The last was about the importance of deep space communications and the possibilities of first contact on a mathematical scale. It was more of a last-ditch effort to obtain additional funding for the Trident project. The development had run dry before any of the relay buoys had even gotten to their designated destinations. Although the project and his team survived on donations each year, Trident took a small portion of funding from NASA's yearly budget to keep it afloat. After staring at the diagram of the Milky Way and the flashing relay buoy, Burke remembered what brought him here in the first place. "The message," he muttered to himself. He slid his chair back to the screen on the right, placed his sweaty palm on the mouse, and exhaled in an attempt to steady his bouncing knee. This was the moment that his entire career had amounted to. The contents of the message could change humanity forever. Or it could be an error, or possibly even a hoax. A small part of him was hoping it was the latter. He moved his mouse to the pulsing notification and clicked on it. A window appeared in the center of his screen. It was in email format with no subject line or body text. The sender was tagged as T2012036, ORNSEC104. It was the closest beacon of the three in that chain of relay buoys, in this case the group T2. T2 was the second Trident rocket ever fired. If the beacon was located in the Orion Belt, or ORN, it was always the oldest of the beacons in its group. The email appeared devoid of content, but a small attachment, 12 megabytes in size, accompanied the otherwise blank message. It was titled 0001_SC906.VDF. VDF, or Virtual Data File, was the format in which the beacons would resave incoming data so that people can view it as either a sound clip or visual footage. Burke had already spent nearly a day carefully backdooring the security system in place that would prevent any single person from responding to a message, or downloading one without explicit permission from NASA and the UN. The contents were the property of the United States government. A response, however, would be on behalf of planet Earth. If he had made it this far, he thought, then why not? "There goes nothing," he said as he downloaded the attachment straight to his desktop and opened it in his media player. What he heard next would change the course of history. Chapter 2. High Glaciers. Alex and Sarah Lockman, age 34, born 2031. Date: November 2065. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to introduce the reason we are all in attendance tonight with our digital wallets at the ready. Light laughter spread across the room. Dr. Sarah Lockman, everybody! The beautifully decorated banquet hall erupted in cheers, and the clink of silverware against plates and glasses of champagne echoed off the elaborate marble walls, decorated with beautiful flowers. Clones, of course. Using hundreds of rare flowers at a non-profit environmental awareness and protection fundraising dinner would be rather ironic. A loud whistle came from the rear of the great hall as the applause petered out. Sarah Lockman leaned into the microphone and let out a long-winded exhale that faded into a chuckle and a smile. She nervously looked to a man that sat at the first of the round dinner tables, a front-row seat next to the stage that overlooked the dining hall. The man sat in an all-black tuxedo with his arms crossed, a slight smirk of reassurance upon his face. It was her husband, Alexander Lockman. He stared at her as if he was in a dream, and she was an enigma. They had met when Sarah was attending George Washington University in 2049. Alex was living in downtown Washington, D.C., working at a coffee shop as a barista after he finished his degree. He had a strong background in bioengineering and was good at it. Ultimately, he settled with his undergrad and decided to take a break. A break that lasted a few years, but he wasn't really counting. Sarah walked into the coffee shop, and the first thing Alex noticed wasn't her soft face or her long brown hair or the leggings she wore while she ran that complemented her toned figure. It was an old Battlestar Galactica patch she had sewn onto her running jacket that caught his eye. It was a show Alex had grown up on and loved into his adulthood, a diehard fan. He could recall the moment she walked in. His manager had to nudge him 3 or 4 times to break his gaze, but she stared back. In fact, they practically watched each other while he made her coffee, a small white chocolate mocha with 2 shots of espresso. Morning coffee twice a week slowly turned into 3 or 4, then twice a day, every day. They began dating only a few weeks after they met. She eventually convinced him to go back to school and pursue his career of being a bioengineer. He did, and they graduated 2 years apart from one another. They married in the spring of the following year. She was a doctor of environmental preservation, and he earned his doctorate in bioengineering. They teased each other about being a power couple that would one day save the world from the slow but inevitable descent into self-destruction. Ahem. Sarah cleared her throat and took a deep breath. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. None of what we do here would be possible without your generous support and donations. Everyone here has taken an oath to lift our planet out of its environmental decline and to reverse hundreds of years of waste and industrial gluttony. And in an effort to uphold that oath this year, so much as 90% of every donation will go into new research and manpower to maintain the vitality of the Gaia Foundation. Alex hated that name. When the idea was nothing more than a scribble on a coffee shop napkin, he protested the name from day one. Sarah insisted on it. Part of her enjoyed watching Alex's frown whenever he heard it or had to say it himself in conversation. There were times when they were in meetings with what Alex would consider important people, and she'd let out a loud cackle when she saw him frown at the name. Sarah continued. Without the support of every person in this room, we wouldn't have been able to start healing our rainforests, the cleansing of our oceans. We lowered soil acidity by 63% in North Carolina and removed over 16 metric tons of waste from landfills this year alone. The room exploded into applause and cheering until she held a hand up. But I would be remiss if I failed to mention the overwhelming reality. Earth is dying. Our home is dying. There was an odd stillness in the room. And we will have to do more than dig into our pockets to save her. We must dig deep within ourselves and find the courage to abandon our egos, to abandon our pride, because the cost is too high. It's too damn high. Sarah composed herself and took a deep breath. Aristotle once said that the perfect formula for a story involved pity, fear, followed by catharsis. We have experienced 100 years of pity while we watched animals become extinct as the ice caps melted, and yet we did nothing to slow global warming. We experienced fear when these changes started to hit home, and not just in some third-world country thousands of miles away. We saw fear when earthquakes shook the foundations of our cities and killed us in our thousands. Many of us losing our homes. She paused, briefly, then resumed. If we intend to save our planet, it begins with reaching the hearts and minds of the few that are making the decisions for the many. We've felt pity. We've seen fear. Our planet, needs an age of catharsis. She pushed the microphone away from her face, stacked together a small pile of pink notes, and exited the stage. The room was still. By the time she got to the final step off the stage, Alex broke from his trance when a sniffle from the woman beside him caught his attention. He was the first to stand and start applauding. Then 3 more stood. 10 more. Eventually, the entire room was on their feet, giving an applause that could be felt in their chests, standing in the corridor outside the banquet room. Sarah took her seat and used her dinner cloth to wipe her eyes and nose. Alex put his arm around her, and she pressed her head into his shoulder. The night rolled on, and Sarah eventually recovered from the emotions her own speech had imparted on her. Alex and Sarah liked to stick together and double-team the important people together to ensure they became donors. Alex would do the pitch, and Sarah, although she was a far better salesman, would do the finessing. They were a phenomenal team. Quite the speech you gave, Sarah. Senator McDaniel from Virginia and his wife Sophie both congratulated her. They were among the top 5 donors every year since the Gaia Foundation had become a federally recognized nonprofit organization. You know, I should have had someone writing all that down, Sophie McDaniel said with a sarcastic frown. Sarah had to play nice, but she knew the senator was only there as part of his political campaign strategy. Senator McDaniel's son's waste export company had been a target of the Gaia Foundation for the past 2 years. Given the state of the world, any type of association with a pro-environmental organization was always a good look in the public eye. Their participation was more of a metaphorical buck than it was sincere. Alex slowly let go of Sarah's hand as the senator and his wife droned on and on about their latest vacation. After 5 minutes of smiling and nodding, he slipped off into the large ballroom almost undetected. He stopped to shake a few hands here and there, but most people in attendance knew that Alex wasn't much of a talker, at least not when it was up to him. He approached the exit to the ballroom, and 2 men opened the doors for him to enter the hallway. He made a right and walked outside on the rooftop of the building. It was November, and already 22 degrees. Snow from the previous night lay frozen on the guardrails surrounding the rooftop edge, and icicles had formed between each of the bars. Alex lit a cigarette after scanning his immediate surroundings. They were his guilty pleasure due to the prohibition on tobacco product, and one that would cost him more than just a fine if he, a founder of the Gaia Foundation, was caught smoking. He peered out over what used to be the Potomac River in the neighboring state of Virginia. The river was frozen over, but garbage and trash poked through the ice like a mountain range in miniature. Everything from rusted shopping carts and ruined bicycles to boat parts littered the space between the two states. It disgusted him. The Potomac was a place from Alex's childhood. He had fond memories of the river from his younger years, and just after his 11th birthday, the river was declared a health hazard due to the growing amount of pollution. He lost the taste for his tobacco spliff and put it out. As he turned around to go back inside to the warmth of the Gaylord Hotel, he was surprised to find his wife stood behind him only inches away. "Jesus!" he gasped. Sarah let out her signature loud pop of a cackling laugh and threw her arms around his neck. "You left me in there all by myself. Now, what kind of man abandons his wife in such dire circumstances?" He kissed her nose, and they walked to the edge of the platform. "So, where did all that come from?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Honestly, those note cards were blank. I winged it," she confessed. "You winged all of that? Every word?" Alex interrupted. "Holy shit, girl, well played." Sarah frowned. She thought that maybe he believed it was an act or that it wasn't sincere. "It's a shame what selfishness achieves," she said. "Most people believe that if you throw money at a problem, they deserve more recognition than those who actually get their hands dirty trying to fix it. Speaking of selfishness, you didn't think to split that cigarette with me?" She could smell it on his breath. Before he could answer, he noticed she had no jacket on and had taken her heels off. She was barefoot. "Sarah, it's freezing. Where's your jacket? Are you actually crazy?" She shrugged. "It's really not that bad, actually. You love to exaggerate, don't you?" Worried, he said, "But it's below 30 degrees. She rolled her eyes and dropped her arms from around his neck. "Let's go." She sighed as she walked away, shoulders slumped. "Sarah," he trailed off. Before following her, he turned around and took one final look at what was left of the old Potomac River. He spat and threw away what was left of his pack of hand-rolled cigarettes. Chapter 3. Eureka. Location: Alaska, USA. Date: October 2065. Before he could press the play button, his nerves got the better of him. Dr. William Burke stood up and paced the room with his hands wrapped tightly around the back of his neck. His office was small and cluttered due to the stacks of signal traffic data that his team was required to analyze if it traveled through the beacons, regardless that the signals were originating from Earth. He had one large window that looked out onto the edge of the campus grounds where the tree line of the seemingly endless Alaskan woods began. On Burke's desk sat 2 monitors, multiple stacks of folders and loose paper, a picture of his sister's family, a red plastic cup containing his favorite pens, and a large blue coffee mug that read "Rocket Fuel" in white block letters. He had his framed awards and glass trophies of recognition above his desk on the wall, but if anyone asked or mentioned the state of his office, he would tell them that he had a system and it was going to stay that way. Behind him was his lab assistant's desk. It was always clean and well organized, the complete opposite of Dr. Burke's. It contained more comic book and sci-fi figurines than most comic shops, but it was done tastefully. "Marcus," he muttered. Marcus was his assistant, a fresh graduate of the university and his pupil in data and transmission analysis. He picked up his cell and pulled up Marcus's contact information, but hesitated. Burke was more selfish than he was smart. He didn't want to share the credit of this discovery with anyone, especially if that meant sharing the fame. He put his phone away. After nearly half an hour of pacing in a manic state, Burke finally mustered the nerve to sit back down and, without hesitation, he clicked the play button on his media player. It was a short, deep burst of sound followed by a higher pitch, then the first tone repeated. In the moment, it was puzzling to him, but the message was certainly intentional, not garbled background noise or a series of clicks and beeps that usually indicated an error in the relay buoy's software. To be sure, he sent a software update to each of the 3 relay buoys in the T2 group for safe measure. However, everything in his career that dealt with possible scenarios in first contact told him that this was an intentionally repeated pattern of sound. Well, shit, he thought to himself. Dr. Burke leapt to his feet in excitement, opened his office window, and shouted, "Eureka!" as he laughed like a child on Christmas morning while knocking one of his many dead plants off the ledge. But no one could hear his celebrations. He was alone on the campus, and it was 3:15 a.m. on a Sunday morning. He listened to the recording incessantly, which wasn't too difficult given the fact the file was just short of 2 hours in duration. The same 3 sounds repeated over and over, with a 1 1/4 second pause between each set. Burke lit a cigar, leaned back and stared at the paused audio file's visual representation of the sound wave. He reached into his pocket for his phone and called Marcus. The phone rang twice, and a groggy voice on the other end spoke. Hello? Dr. Burke? The voice groaned. Marcus, I need you in our office. My office, as soon as you can. Marcus paused before asking, Is everything okay? You do realize it's 3:30 in the morning, don't you? Burke cut him off. Damn the time! You're going to want to see this. You wouldn't believe me even if I tried to explain it to you. Get here ASAP. He didn't wait for Marcus to reply before hanging up. Burke knew he'd show up. He grinned and began to think of the success of his invention. Awards, interviews, endorsements, possibly even a television show. But his thoughts of achievement were soon interrupted by something he hadn't even considered until that moment. A response. He bit down on the cigar, pushed up his glasses, and turned back to the monitor on his left. The map of the Milky Way and a grid showing the location of each relay buoy was still on the screen. He selected the T2-012036 S-CSEC 906 buoy again to look further into the residual data that is collected and saved whenever a transmission is sent through its receiving unit. Dr. Burke leaned into his desk and scoured the data for 10 minutes before he found what he was looking for. Date, time, location, transmission length, frequency type, emission classification. The list went on. Bingo, he whispered. The point of origin in relation to the relay buoy. The message was transmitted for a little over 10 hours, and the relay buoy updates and saves the data stream every 0.02 seconds. However, the numbers representing the point of origin and its position were not constant. They were rapidly increasing, which could only mean one thing. The point of origin was moving. With a simple calculation, Dr. Burke deduced that whatever it was that was emitting this signal was moving at around 50,000 miles per hour down the spine of the Sanctum Crux arm and away from the relay buoy. However, on a cosmic scale, this could be considered a cruising speed, not even a tenth of how fast Dr. Burke's tridents tore through the vacuum of space. This, of course, in some way inflated his ego even more. Hell's bells, Burke groaned. At this speed, the object would be out of range in just under 13 hours, not including the time it would take for his reply to reach each of the other buoys. Under global regulations agreed upon during the conception of Project Trident, any signal received from an unknown object or planet should be reported immediately to both NASA and the UN. But Burke didn't have time for the chain of command song and dance. It could take days for approval on a response, let alone who should respond. This new information meant only one thing to Burke. There was a window of time in which he could send a response, and it was closing. Chapter 4. Difference of Opinion. Marcus Reed, age 25, born 2041. Location, Alaska, USA. Date, October 2065. Marcus was woken by the rumbling of his cell phone on the nightstand beside his bed. It shook a dish full of change like a crude musical instrument, the last thing he wanted to hear this early in the morning. He glanced at the clock. 3:28 a.m. He felt around for his phone, knocking a glass of water over and spilling it across the nightstand and onto the floor. "God damn it," he muttered, sliding his now wet phone off the nightstand. He winced from the screen's brightness, and the name Birkenstein appeared on the display. Hello, Dr. Burke," he said through a slow yawn. Liam Burke was characteristically to the point. "Marcus, I need you in our office. My office, as soon as you can." His voice sounded strange, halfway between panic and excitement. Marcus couldn't tell which, and at this time of the morning, he didn't really care. But Dr. Burke was his boss and mentor, not to mention his favorite professor during his years as a student. Marcus attended the University of Alaska Anchorage for his degree in deep space communications and data analysis. Dr. Burke was a fantastic teacher, but only due to the fact that he had the attention of a large group of people, so his ego was more than fed, which in turn bolstered his ability to teach. Annoyed by the disturbance the phone call had already caused, he took a deep breath. "Is everything okay? You do realize it's 3:30 in the morning, don't you?" he inquired with an eyebrow half-cocked. Dr. Burke ignored him, saying, "Damn the time! You're going to want to see this. You wouldn't believe me even if I tried to explain it to you. Get here ASAP." Before Marcus could protest, the call ended. He looked at his phone as if it had just insulted his mother. Son of a bitch. Marcus spent 20 minutes dragging his feet around his studio apartment, adorned with comic book posters, figurines, and old cosplay outfits, then got dressed and made his way to his car. The windows were frozen over with a 3-inch thick slab of solid ice. In that moment he wanted to cry, but the thought of how cold his tears would be if he did quickly dissuaded him from the emotional display. He glanced at his phone, 3:53 a.m. God damn it, Burke! Marcus was tired. He had only gone to bed 3 hours earlier. His neighbor had a small get-together, and they had got into a heated debate about how an old anime should have ended, which turned into a 4-hour debate with shots of tequila between shouting matches. Marcus managed to clear a small porthole in the ice on the windshield and made his way to the university. He lived only 2 miles from the campus, but in -12-degree Alaskan weather it felt more like 20. On the way, he thought about Dr. Burke's tone of voice. Marcus had never heard him sound so anxious unless he was talking about something to do with his Trident rocket program or his golden days at MIT, but this was different. Burke sounded nervous. Could he have found something? Marcus wondered. No. It's probably a new algorithm or mathematical solution to boosting signal strength, he assumed. But Marcus hadn't convinced himself. Dr. Burke was known for arriving late and leaving early, so what could have kept him here at this time and required the presence of his assistant? Marcus arrived at the university and parked. He sat in his car for a moment, trying to absorb what little heat his air vents could muster. On his way in, he could see the third-floor hallway lights were still illuminated. This was the location of the communications labs, as well as the office he and Dr. Burke shared. Marcus approached the door, swiped his badge, and the lock made a small clicking sound and opened. His wet boots left a trail of water, ice, and snow across the first-floor lobby all the way to the elevator doors. When he arrived on the 3rd floor, he noticed an odd smell. An instant cup of noodles, mixed with the scent of burnt coffee beans. The thought of either at this time made him feel sick. He made a right, then a left, and continued down a long hallway lit by fluorescent strips. The white hallway walls had old science posters with motivational quotes under them, each a little cheesier than the previous. "Marcus!" Burke shouted from the office doorway. Come, please, there is much to do." Marcus let out a small, muffled grunt from behind the scarf that wrapped around his neck and face. He looked Burke up and down, and realized he was wearing the same faded white and gray plaid button-down from Friday last week. He had it unbuttoned, exposing a coffee-stained white t-shirt that stretched taut over his rounded stomach. Dr. Burke was tall and rather thin everywhere else, but he had gained some belly weight over the past few years, along with plenty of gray hair. How long has he been here? Marcus thought to himself. He walked in and set his bag down, dragging his chair across the room to Burke's desk. "Please, sit. Make yourself comfortable," Burke insisted, but there was no room on his desk for anything but the things on his desk. Marcus gave him a look of annoyance. "Dr. Burke, why am I here? You know this is overtime, right?" Marcus said with one hand partially covering his face, his elbow on his knee. "This is why," Dr. Burke said, and turned the monitor on his right-hand side to face Marcus. It was the paused media player with an image of the sound wave he had been obsessing over all night. "So?" Marcus sighed. "So, look at the point of origin." Burke pointed at the monitor, and Marcus squinted to make out the heading. T2012036S-CSEC 906. Wait a second. He trailed off. "Sanctum Crux," Burke confirmed with a grin. "Have you sent out a software update? This could just be—" "Twice," Burke interrupted. "I sent it twice. Everything checks out." Marcus leaned back in his seat, and suddenly the idea of coffee didn't make him feel sick. The fog of exhaustion that had clouded his mind was gone. "Sir, this is huge," he said. "What about the point of origin? What planet is it? Has the system been previously identified?" Dr. Burke grinned, saying, "The point of origin is not a planet, Marcus. It's moving." Marcus shrugged, stating, "Planets move." Dr. Burke sighed as if it were a silly challenge to his claim, one that barely deserved a response. He grabbed his mouse and hit a key on his keyboard. The monitor zoomed into the Sanctum Crux arm of the Milky Way galaxy in Sector 906. "You see any stars? Planets? Asteroids? Marcus, I have been here for hours, and the only explanation is that whatever is emitting this SOS—" Marcus interrupted. "How do you know it's an SOS?" he asked. Burke again bristled with annoyance at the challenge and brought his attention back to the monitor on the right and clicked the play button on the media player. The sound that came through the speakers sent chills down Marcus's spine. It frightened him, but it also sounded familiar. "That's a cello," Marcus said. "A cello?" Burke crossed his arms and looked doubtful. "Yes, a cello. My ex-girl played it. It's an odd-sounding cello, but it's damn close." Burke shifted his eyes between the media player and Marcus. "Look, if you don't believe me," Burke cut him off. "It's an absurd assumption is what it is." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen 3 or 4 times and showed it to Dr. Burke. It was a YouTube video of a young woman playing the cello. Burke listened, rubbing his unkempt gray and black beard in skepticism. "All right, it's close. But the reverberation patterns are far too complex to be that of an instrument." Burke was right. The sound wave and its underlying frequency patterns were nowhere close to any instrument found on Earth. But still, it was pretty close, Marcus thought. "We have to respond," Burke said in a serious tone. "Respond? Sir, we have to notify NASA. Why haven't you sent this up the chain yet?" Marcus found himself standing now, with his arms gesturing his impatience and concern. "This thing will be out of range in less than 12 hours if we don't send a reply," Burke said. "You can't do that," Marcus urged. "If you send a reply without notifying NASA or the UN, especially without running it through the proper channels for further analysis, they will shut us down." "Us," Dr. Burke said with a look of sarcastic surprise. "You mean me. This is my research, my technology, and it's my call. The world has waited 30 years for this opportunity, and we are to just let it pass because Marcus Reed wants to follow the chain of command? This could change the world. It will change the world." Burke was speaking from broken pride at this point. Burke's research had been long forgotten over the past 30 years. He had something to prove to the world, and most of all to himself. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. Then why call me in here at 3 in the morning if this is your research and your call? What the hell am I doing here? In truth, Burke called him in for more of a session of gloating than assistance on how to proceed. But Marcus wasn't wrong. They would shut the project down if he sent a response without going through the proper channels. But that didn't matter to Burke, as the window for replying was getting smaller and smaller. Marcus, I apologize for what I said. You have been a great deal of help and insight since you've been working for me, and I would be mistaken to forget or ignore that. But you must see the bigger picture here. The scale of this opportunity, it's priceless. Burke's words calmed the tension in Marcus's face. He knew Burke was right. He just didn't like how smug and selfish he was about it all. Sir, I understand how much this means to you. Yes, the repetition of the sound pattern does shadow the patterns of an alarm or distress call, but we cannot act upon half-baked assumptions. If you send this reply, I want no involvement. Burke was stunned, but also relieved he wanted no part in the decision, as it also meant he got no credit, which meant more fame for Dr. Liam Burke. I understand what it means, Marcus. We are sending that reply. We? Marcus said in a mocking tone. I am sending the message, Marcus, Burke said. Marcus held up his hands defensively and sat down. Burke cracked his knuckles, then brought up the list of relay buoys and selected the first in the T2 chain, T2012036 ORNSEC-104. He loaded a codex file containing the entire English language, along with a library of German, Russian, and Mandarin phrases and their alphabets into a text field. The codex was prepared for potentially dealing with an alien race that used a language far different to our own, so that if an attempt of contact were made, the chances of a comprehensible response were much higher. He then typed, "Message received, Burke." Marcus sat quietly in his chair next to Dr. Burke's desk with his arms crossed. He was trying not to seem so intrigued, but, in truth, he was more scared than anything. The attachment of the codex finished loading, and the message was ready to send. Burke's knee started to bounce rapidly again. It annoyed Marcus because his constant fidgeting sent a subtle shockwave through the room and caused something in the clutter of the office to click incessantly. Burke looked over to Marcus. Here we go. Let's see who our new friends are. Marcus scoffed. Burke placed his hand on the mouse and hit the send button in the message window, and it closed. It was followed by a smaller window that appeared with the words "Message sent, transmission en route," accompanied by a loading bar and a timer that read estimated time 3 hours 2 minutes 44 seconds. Burke let out a long sigh of relief, and Marcus stood up. Well, congratulations, sir. You've either made history or ended your career. Possibly both. He put a hand on Burke's shoulder. It was a sincere gesture, as Marcus was happy to see him so excited and positive about this new discovery. It was long overdue. The next few hours flew by. Marcus warmed up his leftover lunch from the previous week he had left in the refrigerator and had 3 cups of coffee. Burke sat at his computer screen watching the loading bar slowly crawl across the screen. Must be 98% done, Burke whispered to himself. Marcus got up from the futon and joined him at his desk. The loading bar hit 100% and his speakers emitted a small ping, signaling that the message had made it to the buoy. The window that once displayed a loading bar now said "Message transmitting." Their attention turned to the screen on the left that displayed the T2012036S-CSEC-906 buoy, and it pulsed yellow. The dot that represented the buoy extended a small vector from it to the edge of the highlighted circle around the buoy, representing its comms range. The vector then connected to the blip, signifying that something was receiving the transmission. Marcus's heart pounded, and he gripped the armrest of his chair. Is that? He asked, but Burke interrupted. Yes, that's them. The transmission was a constant flow of information uploading, and the point of origin data was constantly updated and saved so the two of them could see the blip moving at its previously discovered constant speed. It was moving about 1/10 of a grid square every 5 seconds or so, and in effect this allowed them to see a relatively live feed of the object's movements, so long as they were transmitting. A ping from the speakers sounded again, and a small window appeared that read, "Transmission delivery successful. Open channel," with 2 options, yes and no. Burke hesitated for a second, then selected the Yes button. This allowed for much faster communication, but it sacrificed the quality of the transmissions. Each message would not be rebuilt and saved each time it connected with a buoy, but instead it was forwarded instantaneously to the next. It was intended for direct communication, without waiting hours for a message to send. But since there was now no need for an attachment with each message, only text, the messages were received every 20 to 30 seconds, as opposed to 3 to 6 hours. Another ping from the speakers and a notification appeared on the screen. 1 new message. Burke swallowed hard and clicked the notification. A window appeared stating, "Critical help. Burke." Burke's eyes widened, and Marcus knocked his coffee off the side of the desk and onto the floor. "Unbelievable," Marcus said in a state of pure shock. Burke was frozen in place, his jaw wide open and his eyes staring at the screen as if it were an abyss. "Doctor, they've stopped." The blip on the map indicating the buoy's comm range had come to a complete standstill. The two stared at it in sheer disbelief. A third ping from the speakers and a new message appeared. "We come. Burke." Marcus leaned forward, not believing his eyes. "Oh, shit! You see that, right?" Marcus panicked, waving his finger at the screen. "They want to come here, Burke. They can't do that, Dr. Burke." The other man was still motionless, and without breaking his focus on the message, he grabbed Marcus's waving hand. "You tell no one of this. Not a bloody word," he growled, now looking Marcus directly in the eyes. "No one." Marcus scoffed. "Don't tell anyone that a fucking alien ship capable of damn near light speed is headed for us here, Earth? Yeah, okay, sounds legit. Are you fucking crazy?" Before Burke could respond with a threat, another ping emitted from the speakers. What happened next sent a chill down their spines, and the hair on the back of their necks stood up. The blip jumped 9 grid spaces, several billion miles in a matter of seconds. Not away from the buoy, but past it, and in their direction. Thank you for listening to this 4-chapter demo of Catharsis 2066 by David McGoings, read by Greg Tremblay. If you've enjoyed this segment and wish to support the author in the creation of the world surrounding the story, then please feel free to make a donation at gofundme.com/Catharsis2066. You can also support the author by following Catharsis on social media at Catharsis2066 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. There you can find exclusive news, giveaways, artwork, and engage with the author. Thank you for your support, and we hope to hear from you soon.